What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. This week, it unfortunately was a loss. 36-27 was the final score against the Detroit Lions. For the first time in, I believe, over 2 years, the Lions were coming into this game as favorites on sportsbooks and on betting apps. I believe the average was around a 1-point favorite over the Commanders, so still pretty even. But I mean, gambling and stuff, they did give them the advantage. And I mean, they definitely covered the spread because being the Commanders by 9 to finish things off, this game was filled with a bunch of miscues for Washington. I could go on and on about this, but I'm going to try and limit it to 5 minutes before we get into the good stuff. But here, I guess let's just start off with that bad play calling. It happened pretty much the entire second half, or not really the entire, but a lot down the road in that fourth quarter where Washington was pretty close to possibly coming back twice in that fourth quarter. They got the thing down to a one-score game when they were pretty much getting blown out in that first half. The score being at the halftime 22-0, but they were able to come back, bring it within one touchdown, and I believe an 8-point game at one point as well. Twice in that last quarter. It's just the defense couldn't really hold them. But the play calling was just horrendous from Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio, Scott Turner in the third quarter. His play calling was pretty solid. But down the line, his play calling became pretty bad as well. I mean, at one point, we were up by 8, I think, or sorry, we were down by 8, I think, and the extra point would make it a 7-point game. But instead, we decided to go for 2 for some reason. I don't know why we did it, because I guess maybe the coach just lost count of what the score was or something. Because analytics, they didn't like the analytics say you can't go to analytics and say, oh, hey, well, the analytics told us to go for 2 there. No, they didn't. So I don't really know what happened. I don't know if it was mentioned in the press conference at all, but that was a very confusing call from Washington down the line. The run game with Antonio Gibson, it clearly throughout the entire game, it was not there. Gibson finishing 14 carries for 28 yards, averaging 2 yards per carry. He did end up with a score as well, but it wasn't a great game on the run game either, as Carson Wentz had 2 carries for 23 yards. So there was really no hope at all. J.D. McKissick, 3 carries for 9 yards, and Jonathan Williams, who was the other running back active, didn't take any snaps at all or any carries at all throughout the entire game. And then the other thing here was not calling timeouts down the line. It was a one-score game. We were driving on offense, and we just weren't hurry up offense at all, because it was a one-score game. We were driving. Sorry, it was a two-score game. We were driving. Possible chance of getting back into the game, and just Carson Wentz. They were huddling up after every play. It was like 40 seconds in between plays, all the way down to the 2-minute warning. It pretty much felt like they just gave up, which has been a common theme for Washington fans to feel when their team plays every Sunday for the last few seasons. So that is something Washington definitely needs to work on. Carson Wentz overall, he didn't have the best of games. He didn't have the worst of games. Similar game last week, he was 30 of 46, a lot of passes, 337 yards, an average of 7.3, 3 touchdowns, and a pick as well. He did take 5 sacks, which this offensive line, I will say, was not that helpful. It was 5 sacks for 29 yards, although Wentz did end up having a 99.7 passer rating, which is pretty solid for him. Besides the interception, which wasn't really his fault, he threw it a little high. Should have been a little bit lower for the 6'5", I believe, Logan Thomas, but it bounced off of 2 defenders, bounced off of Logan Thomas, and ended up in the hands of one of the Lions' cornerbacks or safeties. So I wouldn't really call the interception his fault. 3 touchdowns, pretty solid as well. Threw some nice dimes throughout the air. Speaking of the air, Curtis Samuel was a leading receiver with 78 yards on 7 catches, and he also had a touchdown as well. I believe that's Samuel's second touchdown on the season. Terry, no touchdowns for him, but he had 4 catches for 75 yards. And then the rookie, Jahan Dotson, 4 catches, 59 yards, and a touchdown as well. I mean, great game from Dotson, and this rookie is showing really what he can be in the future once maybe Curtis Samuel goes away or something. But this receiver core and the weapons that we have on offense, besides, you could say, Carson Wentz. Take Carson Wentz out of the picture, and this offense is just absolutely insane, filled with talent. Terry, Jahan, Curtis, all breaking out this year. And then, of course, on the ground game, Antonio Gibson didn't have the greatest of games, but when we get Brian Robinson back, there were definitely some plays in the game where you knew if we had Brian Robinson, then we probably would have scored there, or we probably would have gotten the first down there when we tried to hand it off to Antonio Gibson, who wasn't really that much of a power back, but more of an elusive back, rather than Brian Robinson, who is that power back that we did draft to be that power back down the goal line, which Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic struggled with last season. Now we move on to the defense. I mean, overall, the offense was pretty solid. I'm not that mad about the offense. They played pretty great in that second half. In that first half, though, they were pretty much dead. 0 points scored in that entire first half. But the defense is a whole different story. I mean, it was an absolute disaster. 36 points to the Detroit Lions, who scored, I mean, fairly, they scored over 30 points last week against the Eagles, which are regarded as one of the better defenses in the NFL. But this was definitely not a good look for Washington, as again, we were down 22-0 at the half. Derek Forrest was the leading tackler, or tied for the most tackles of the game, with Cole Holcomb, each of them having 10 tackles. Again, Derek Forrest coming in for Cam Curl, who was once more out of this game with his finger injury or thumb injury or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see if he comes back next week against Philadelphia. But Derek Forrest, who's coming in his place, he's had two very great performances right now, and he could be in that rotation maybe come second, third downs, or throughout downs, rotating downs and stuff with Bobby McCain and Cam Curl at those two safety spots. So I think Derek Forrest, a great run stopper as well. He had a very solid game, 8 solo tackles of those 10 total tackles. Again, Cole Holcomb, of course, the middle linebacker, definitely should be getting those tackles. He had 10. After that was Bobby McCain with 6. Jamin Davis, who had a pretty solid game, probably one of the better games of his career to this date so far. 4 tackles for him, 3 of those being solos, and also one sack, and 1 tackle for loss, 2 quarterback hits as well. A great game from Jamin Davis, and really not that mad about him. He had some great coverages as well, pass breakups. It was a great game from him. On the corner side of things, not so great. Kendall Fuller gave up a touchdown. Benjamin St-Juste, he had a few key tackles, but he also gave up a touchdown as well. In total, our pass rush had 3 sacks in total, one of them being Jamin Davis towards the beginning of the game. Daron Payne and James Smith-Williams each had the other 2. Montez Sweat wasn't really a factor in this one. Jonathan Allen wasn't really a factor in this one. Again, Jonathan Allen coming into this game with basically a injury, I believe, to some part of his leg that was kind of limiting him all of the practices this week. But he came in as questionable. He did play, and that was good. I do believe he was a little bit limited, though, as Daniel Wise did get some snaps. Donovan Jeter got some snaps. F.A. Obata got some snaps. Also, Casey Tuhill got some snaps as well on the edge rusher spot, of course, replacing Chase Young, and James Smith-Williams also replacing Chase Young. Casey Tuhill did end up leaving the game with an injury, I believe. Or no, it was like some concussion or something like that. But I do believe he is fine. It'll be interesting to see if he isn't able to play next week against Philadelphia, how James Smith-Williams will do in replacing that edge rusher spot, as Williams did get that sack today earlier on. As for the Detroit Lions offense, they really got anything they wanted. Goff went 20 of 34 for over 250 yards and 4 touchdowns. Amon St. Brown was the leading rusher on the day for the Detroit Lions, and he was the leading receiver, totaling over 170 yards, 180 yards maybe as well. I mean, he had a day if you had him in fantasy. 2 carries for 68 yards, which is with his longest being a 58-yard jet sweep, which I feel like miscommunication was a big issue for this Washington front 7 and the Washington secondary as well. A lot of miscommunication, a lot of like fake stuff. The Lions ran a lot of jet sweeps, and it really hurt Washington a lot. Deandre Swift on that run game as well. He was limited coming into this game. It was going to be interesting to see if he played. He does end up playing, and he absolutely destroyed the Washington front 7. 5 carries for 56 yards, and then through the air as well, 2 catches for 31 yards and a touchdown, which he basically juked out the entire Washington secondary to pretty much seal the game at one point in that fourth quarter. It was pretty disappointing if you're a Washington fan seeing your entire secondary get juked out pretty easily by a guy who's coming into the game with only one good ankle. Jamal Williams was the leading carrier for the Detroit Lions. He had 12 carries for 53 yards. Craig Reynolds, the Hard Knocks favorite, Hard Knocks highlight, he had 3 carries for 16 yards as well. And then through the air, I already talked about DeAndre Swift and St. Brown, who had 116 yards through the air on 9 catches and 2 touchdowns. Josh Reynolds had that 4th touchdown, 3 catches and 38 yards, and of course that touchdown as well from Jared Goff, who finished with 4. So, I mean, overall, it was a pretty rough day for the secondary. It'll be interesting to see what we can do next week when we go up against AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. So it's looking a little scary for that Washington secondary. But then on the defensive side of things for the Lions as well, a great game. Mike Hughes, Will Harris, and Malcolm Rodriguez, the Hard Knocks fan favorite, all were tied for the most tackles for the Detroit Lions, all with 8. Malcolm Rodriguez, he just seemed to be all over the field, getting tackle after tackle. He had a quarterback hit as well. I mean, the offensive line for Washington was just not great. Another guy I want to talk about is Aiden Hutchinson. He had 6 tackles, 5 of those being solo, and of course 3 sacks, a big one. All 3 of those coming in the first half, which he was just all over the backfield. He had 2 tackles for loss as well and 3 quarterback hits. Just an absolute stellar day from the number 2 overall pick. Deshaun Elliott had 6 tackles. Alex Anzalone had 6 tackles. Jeff Okudah, a former top 3 pick back in 2021, of course, last year having a season-ending injury. He had 5 tackles, and he was pretty locked down on Terry McLaurin. I mean, I would say it's a pretty fair battle between Okudah and Terry McLaurin, 2 former teammates at The Ohio State University. But I would definitely give Okudah the edge. I don't know if it was because Carson Wentz couldn't get the ball to Terry or just Terry couldn't catch it. But Okudah, great game from him, I feel like, against one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And so this is going to bring us to next week. Washington will enter the game 1-1. The Eagles, I'm recording this before the Eagles play the Vikings on Monday night. So it'll be interesting to see and how they're going to play in that one. 2 high-flying offenses in that game. But they are right now undefeated as I'm talking about this, as they beat the Lions, of course, week 1. But it'll be interesting to see how in a game plan for that offense with Miles Sanders, the other guy in the backfield, Boston Scott, Dallas Goedert, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. That offense is stacked. Same with the defense as well. Darius Slay, James Bradbury. I can just go on and on naming these guys. CJ Gardner-Johnson now as well. Kaiser White, who was a guy that we might have targeted in the last offseason. So, I mean, their offense is stacked. Hopefully we can stay in it. We're going to be back at Fedex Field next weekend. But with that being said, that'll be it for this episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. There's a tough loss this week, but hopefully we can bounce back next week against the Philadelphia Eagles. See you guys in the next one. Peace.